Hello and welcome back to the MDO webinar series. Today we will walk you through on how MDO can help in vendor onboarding and vendor data management process. My name is Sahil Naqvi and I'll be your host in this session. The topics we will cover today include an overview about MDO, the features and differentiators of the product, and we'll talk specifically about the use case of MDO being used as a vendor onboarding or vendor management uh, application. Um, and then we'll be followed by an MDO demo. Now, the business challenge on, on vendor data or supplier data, as it is interchangeably called, originates from the fact that companies run on products or goods or components or at times services that vendors supply. The entire supply chain can be at times complex and multi-layered. Now, knowing about your vendor data is important for decision making by procurement or sourcing teams, ensuring data quality and data compliances. Um, and it becomes important to have a streamlined process and a tool that helps in managing this data effectively. This is where MDO comes into picture. Uh, MDO can be that tool which is easy to set up, easy to configure, and onboard all types of vendors, including the non-tech savvy vendors, to maintain their information within the tool. So it has business owner collaboration within the both outside the organization and within the organization, role-based access um, uh, of who sees what information or access to which information set, multilingual presentation, a self-help portal for business analysts who manage the application to know how to set up the system, a configurable dashboard for instant information that you want to see, a mobile app to make sure that approvals and registrations can also happen on a smart device. Um, and then from a workflow perspective, MD also has SLARs that can be managed and mass processing for mass changes uh, uh, or at times mass creations as well. Now, what is available out of the box packaged application within MDO are these masters and the business rules and validations and templates around it. Now, MDO also has a passive governance side of managing data quality. How it helps is that in this case, the source of information can be some other source where MDO is fetching that information for ensuring data compliance or data quality. And the validation engine within MDO, where all the business rules are defined, is run against all those data set that are fetched. And then cleansed and standardized data is sent back to the different target systems that can consume it, and could be ERP or the SRM system. And from an active governance perspective, all these validations happen at the time of data entry, where the information about the master is entered within MDO. Validations and check happen at the time of the data entry itself. Contributors contribute, and approvals happen through MDO, and then it can be consumed by one or more than one system. The key differentiators of MDO as a platform from a vendor management perspective includes that MDO also has API engine which can call external systems or external databases to cross-verify information filled in. We can also verify attachments that have been uploaded by suppliers or vendor. Has a data privacy compliance flow as well for the entire right to be forgotten, the GDPR aspect of for your business partners. Pre-built business rules for all the masters that come out of the box, and also have certified integrators for systems like SAP and Salesforce. Now, from a vendor management perspective, what MDO does is, first of all, it makes sure that the new supplier or new vendor that is getting created is unique, doesn't does not match up exactly with any of the previous record, or if it does, then gives a prompt that what are the matching or potential duplicates in the system. Ensures that the entire data compliance and risk management is effectively managed, giving access to the vendors for their key information. Has ownership in terms of who fills up what set of data. So in MDO, the entire configuration of data ownership can be at one field level. So individual fields can have one business function that own it, and unless they have either entered it themselves or verified that data, that record will not flow into the next step of the workflow. Okay. Vendors can later on collaborate. They can put in their key information like address and bank details, and if required at a later stage they want to update any of this information, they can use the MDO portal to do that. The whole entire onboarding process can be customizable of how you want the vendors to get onboarded, either through your website or through some other system. Now, vendor hierarchies can be maintained. Vendors can be linked to a top hierarchy, and subsequent hierarchies and classifications can be maintained there. And the ownership of the onus of making sure that the data is right in the ERP system lies with the supplier, because they will have access to MDO, making sure that at any point of time the data is clean and the most updated and accurate one. Now, what it all does is gives the business a more confidence on what data they have about all the suppliers in their ERP system. The way MDO can be set up for the vendor onboarding is one is where the onboarding process can be some of the systems like the SAP Ariba, where the vendors onboard, and that triggers a workflow in MDO, goes to the different business functions for approval before that record is updated in the SAP ERP. The other way of doing that is providing a URL on the website, which can be a vendor registration form. Vendors can register, will trigger a workflow, and only the approved ones gets into the ERP system. Now, the third option is more close to the vendors that you really want to get registered in the ERP system. This will be initiated by the buyer or people who are dealing for that item or service with the supplier. They will initiate that request. They will fill in basic details like name and email ID, and on the email ID is when the vendor will receive that request for further providing further information in MDO, which will go to a workflow process, different approvers, procurement and finance approving that before it integrates into the ERP system for any transactions to be done. Now, where is apart from the governance aspect, where does the whole data quality platform comes into MDO, where is add value, is that on the screen we can have validations, external validations, and reading from the attachments, calling APIs and verifying that data, and also making the information available in those external sources. So that can be made visible to the approvers, which can be procurement specialist, or which can be the buyer, to make sure that this information is matching exactly with how it is put up in sources like DNB. Now, MDO can also have a very extensive setup for duplicate check, which again can prompt upfront at the time of creating a new vendor or a supplier, or it can also be executed in a passive mode, which is after all the creations. For example, when you have mergers and acquisitions, more data coming in, you want to cross-check how many records are now potential duplicates, and all that can be run through this setup of duplicate check, and the data owners can manually merge, and sometimes also the transformation rules that can merge a record, like an auto merge, and merge multiple items into one. Now, the passive governance mode is the one where you have a data set available. You want to run the duplicate, the business rules like duplicate check, the validness, accuracy, completeness, all on that set of data, and it gives output in terms of what is your. It also gives a quantitative output based upon the weightage that we have assigned to each of the business rule, that what is the actual number of or the score of data quality for each of these items. Okay, and you can have different visualization of the data within MDO, which is more like an analyzer and an insight of how your data looks like. All right, so I wanted to give you a quick overview about what MDO does, and we'll jump on to the live demo of the tool now. So the MDO process of registration, as we mentioned, that starts either from the registration on the website. So you have a link of MDO on your portal, on your website, wherever you want to make it public, and the company that wants to get registered as a vendor fills up that brief form, and they can submit it, which will in turn trigger a workflow and goes to the approval process, and they will also receive a subsequent action to fill up additional details like bank and address details. The other scenario is where you want it to be a closed registration process only to the selected suppliers. That's where the buyer initiates. So this buyer can be a services buyer or an MRO buyer. At this point, you can visualize this more as a role. It will be individuals who have buyer authorizations assigned in MDO. So they have all the options of searching an existing vendor either by the name or their address and all these different criteria around which they want to search by to make sure that whether this vendor already exists or do we need to create new. So once they have cross-checked through all their searching tools available in MDO, and they're sure that I need to create a new, is when they will go and request for a new vendor in MDO. They also have an option of doing advanced search in MDO. They can keep filtering out based upon one of the drop-down values within MDO, filtering out vendors based upon type or different other criterias. Now, if the record is not found and they go into create news, when you'll have a simple form of a new vendor creation, a lot of fields getting defaulted based upon the location of the user or how the other fields should behave based upon the hierarchy fields entered. Now, this vendor email ID is where the request will be sent to the vendor to fill up their details, their set of data. What is the reason for this new vendor creation? Some basic purchasing information about this request. So you see the asterisks donate the mandatory fields in the form. The others can be optional. So the entire layout, the entire form can be set up, configured in MDO, which we'll cover in this demo. Now, once this request has been raised in MDO, it will trigger a workflow. This will now go into the sourcing lead. So again, the whole workflow configuration, how you want your approval process to happen, can be set up as per the business requirement or as per the type of vendor as well. Different approvers look at the different set of data you can have while they're approving, depending upon what field they own, they will be able to edit. Otherwise, they will see it on a read-only mode. They can either approve or send back for corrections. Now, this is the point, or this is the way the vendor receives that request. They will have a direct link of MDO application and a temporary user ID and password through which they can log in. And once they log in into MDO is when they will get to see that there's an action pending for them. And this action is for providing additional information about themselves. That will have the address information, things like their DUNS number, their bank details, communication details. MD also has the bank master maintained within here, so they can search for the bank key directly from a drop down. You can enter the IBAN number. And you also attach single or more than one attachment. So each of these attachments, they can be an expiry date, which will trigger reminders and notifications prior to the. It will be like a renewal reminder, making sure that this is renewed on time. So again, the notifications we can set up either going only to the vendor or to the buyer and the vendor together, that a particular registration or license is expiring, needs a renewal. So what happens when the vendor submits this form? First of all the validations are checked, whether all the data is filled up as per the type of the field and validness of the data entered. Once they submit it, it will still be in the workflow. It will go to different other users who fill up or who review the set of data that they own. Could be finance, could be procurement specialist filling up the procurement information, things like payment method and payment terms for this vendor. Right. So again, dependencies and filtering out information based upon some other field. Those things can be set up here for the ease of data entry. A lot of default values, unless that is changed, that requires a change that can go in like that. Now this is where we have external checks. Like in this case, what we're showing is a DNB check where what is the information stored in the DNB database for this vendor based upon the DUNS number provided and what has been filled up. So this procurement specialist has an option of either approving it with these changes. For example, country US and United States, he knows that this is not different, and things that are not really a mismatch, they can take a call and approve it to the next stage. So once all these approvers have approved within this workflow, what happens is in the background, this record gets integrated with SAP, and this item is now available in the SAP system for managing or for more transactions like purchase orders and contracts getting created from it. There's no manual transactions required in SAP. All that would happen in the background. Now, additionally, what the vendor can also have, which we have incorporated pretty recently in MDO, is the whole GDPR compliance form for vendors from a data privacy perspective. They can request. They have a right to be forgotten. They can request that my data be removed from the database of the ERP system completely. and the reason of why they are requesting that, additional information, all that can be filled up in this form, and this will again trigger a workflow, goes to the data officer within the industry, and they will either take a call whether it is good to get this item or this information completely removed from the system, or is there any reason why we still need that information. So supplier fills it up, and the data protection officer then reviews that. They can put up their comments on this request before this request is executed. So that is about how MDO active governance can help in the whole workflow and managing the process of vendor onboarding and vendor data management. Now, the other aspect of MDO is how we can use the system in a more passive governance way, where MDO is cross-checking or verifying data available within the system. This can be the information from one source or more than one source, where we fetch everything into MDO and run those business rules and come up with a discrepancy or a mismatch report below. It has all the items that does not have 100% score on duplicate on data quality, and as a business owner, one can either keep correcting that one by one, or they have an option of correcting or changing that in bulk, which is the MDO Excel Connect. Now, the MDO Excel Connect is an offline version of MDO. This can be done even when somebody is not connected with the network, with the application. They can keep correcting and validating all that information, and when they validate it, it will show up how many records have been now successfully cleansed or corrected, and as and when they keep doing it. Now, when they're back in connectivity, they can upload this back into MDO. You can see the count now getting better with the corrections that we have made for those records. A different set of approvers, as we said, might own different set of data. So depending upon what field has a mismatch, it can be assigned to those individuals. The other part of the passive governance is how we set up duplicate checks or how we run duplicate checks within MDO. So we can have potential duplicates identified based upon combination of fields, fuzzy logic, or exact match. And then once MDO puts that out into a list of items that are duplicates, the business owner has option of deciding which one to be the master record and what data to be moved from into this master record from the other record, and the other record becomes inactive. So you're kind of identifying which is my master record out of 4 potential duplicates and making that as the active items, all other being inactive. Now, the MDO data quality also has a visual or a trending analysis, which is the data insight. We can look at is the data quality over the period of time, is it improving or is it deteriorating with some mergers or acquisition happening? The different combinations we can, for completeness, validness, accuracy reports. What is the percentage of record that are cleansed? Within the date range, you can cross-check how many records have some discrepancy for each of these different types, and there's a list of items again. Now, all of this, how that is set up, we'll cover that aspect because it's important to to understand that MDO is an application that doesn't require code level change. It is all how we set up or how business manages the application uh, that we can set up all these business rules, workflows, uh, and duplicate check different validations, including the layouts and the fields. So what we're looking at, we're focusing on the vendor master as the object. So we'll go in there, all these other masters in MDO which are available. Within vendor master, we have first of all the list of fields within the MDO metadata, the standard ones, and also we can add the custom ones. So adding or managing a new field is based upon the field type and what characteristics of the field we assign it. So if we look at how we create a new one, we can go in and choose what is my field type. Is it text, drop down, checkbox? All these different kind of fields are predefined in MDO, email, and including geolocation. Once we define what field type uh, we want to go ahead and create, the second step is defining the name and what is the field length, what kind of input can go into that field, more characteristics of that field, and you can also define whether it's an uppercase or a lowercase kind of field. A help text for now, which will be a mouse over when you put the mouse cursor on that field, and then uh, uh, as a specific type of field, we can say whether this should be visible in the search list layout, or it should be a transient field, which at the time of data copying should not get copied, or it can be a completeness kind of field. So it defines whether my record has all the right uh, inputs in that field or not. So when you look at the report coming out of MDO from a completeness perspective, it can show up like a 70% or 80% complete, based upon whether this particular field is, or all those fields that have been marked as completeness are filled in or not. So this is one level of check of making sure the data is filled up, but whether the data entries are right or not is through all these additional checks like external checks or within MDO of verifying that data. So you can include the drop downs in MDO. You can either upload in Excel or you can manually manage that. You can also maintain in multiple different languages for each of these drop down. How should this field be visible for each of the individual language that we are setting it up for. So MDO is available in about 17 different languages by default, and then we can also include additional languages if need be. Now, once this field is added to the metadata, the other thing is to add it to the active layouts. Now, these layouts are the forms that we fill up for each of these individual roles, like the vendor role or the buyer role. We can define for which of the role this field should be mandatory and for which event. Then you can also define whether this should be available only on the mobile app or both on the mobile, because the mobile UI might be different from the actual web UI with a fewer fields showing up. And once we have defined this layout, we map it to a role and the event, the combination of that. Why we do that is same role can have different layouts for different events like create or change. An option of choosing which events it should be getting defined to. That's how you can maintain single or multiple layouts in MDO. There are, of course, data security and permission setup that we can do, but we'll focus on the data quality side of things, which we have seen as an output in our previous uh, section. We will look at how we are defining these rules here, whether it's a dependency, an API, a duplicate check, or a metadata rule. They're all predefined type of rules. We first select what type of rule we are defining, and then on the category. So all this helps in when we are visualizing that data, whether this is which category it belongs to, what is the business rule that is failing. It gives a better picture of what is wrong with that data set. So then the entire section of the business rule configuration can be, as I said, can be maintained by the business analyst. Doesn't require any code change, including the weightage of each of these business rule and getting a quantitative score out of the rules or schema that we run. So schema is a set of business rules. So we'll keep defining these individual business rule, assign it to a particular schema, like in this case, the vendor duplicate check or data check, separate schemas. We can keep setting up the different. We can also configure how my list page looks like. So the output report that we were looking at uh, for the schema that we ran can be completely configurable here. You can set up how we want the notification templates and how frequently you want to send the reminders for individuals through this. Now on the duplicate check, we can have both the active and passive setup for duplicate check, which means that at the time of new record getting created, new supplier getting created, that is, you can see the list of suppliers that are identical or could be potential duplicates. And you can also run it in the passive governance mode and check whether we want to deactivate one of the potential duplicates there or not. Now, for each of these individual fields that you want to run this duplicate check on, we can define whether it should be a fuzzy logic check, whether it should be an exact match, things like phone number and tax number can be an exact match, things like name and everything can be. And you can also put up the exclusion rules, the words that should be excluded while I'm setting up the duplicate check, or similar words which again would not be required to identify as potential duplicates. Now for the active governance, we can also set up the what should happen as an outcome of a potential duplicate getting identified. So if you have identified some 4 fields for potential duplicates, then we can say that for what range it should just show a warning, but still allow the user to create a new. At what level it should be a hard stop based upon the potential duplicates identified. Then within the notification section, we can define that what events you want to send out that notification, whether it should be on a new creation or a change of a value from a change of a field. What role it should get notified. So all users within that role will receive a notification in that case. You can also set up the template for notifications for each of these events. How will the email actually look like? Now, every time an action is assigned to a user in MDO or a notification is sent, and they will either receive an email along with a push notification on the mobile app. We'll also have a section on the top in MDO where the notification comes up, so that they are fully aware that this is an action that is pending for their for their review or their entry of data. Now, what we're looking at now is a more advanced setup of MDO. We'll cover the workflow part of it, how we are setting up these different workflows, how easy it is to set up, and on what are the different additional things that we can do on the workflow setup part. So these are the different steps of the workflow. We define which roles the step will be applicable, and then you can define the SLARs for each of these steps. What is the grace period for a reminder? After what period it should get escalated to the next level of within the hierarchy that we can define in MDO? How many occurrences we want? So this is more how we calculate the SLARs. What are the working hours? What are the days off in the week? What is the time zone? Making sure that an SLA is calculated based upon only the working hours, or reminders and escalations to happen based upon that only. Even the holiday calendar can be set up. Okay. Right. So that is how we set up the entire workflow in MDO. Also look at the escalation setup for each of the individual user. We can set up who's the next level of escalation person assigned in MDO. We can also upload an organization hierarchy directly in MDO through an Excel that can be maintained here. Right. In the other parts of it, we can have the password policy set up based upon how password should be maintained in the organization, and the entire application can also have single sign-on, SAML based single sign-on. So users does not have to put in their user ID and password every time they have to log into MDO. It can be the direct access through can be through if your application portals or just the web URL of MDO will land them directly into the screens of the system. Right. So we wanted to give you a quick overview about what MDO, how MDO can help on the vendor management side of things. You can have more information about us through our YouTube channel. You can visit our website for more details. You can write to us on sales@prospecta.com to have a detailed demo setup on this aspect. We're also open to, because we have some time available, also open to some questions that we can take at this point. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on the chat in our webinar chat. I think we already have one question that I see there from Kevin. So this is around, can only passive governance be used? Okay, so right. So I believe, Kevin, if what I understand your question, you don't want your vendors to, or you think that there could be a challenge giving access of MDO to vendors to self-register, and you want to maintain the data quality through these passive governance rules checks. Now, this is a very valid scenario. At times, you don't visualize all your vendors logging into a portal and doing the data entry there. So there are two ways out of it. First of all, to answer your question, yes, the only passive governance setup can be used there, can be done, where MDO will pull up data from whatever sources you're maintaining your vendors, and then run those business rules against it, and then business owners will get an action to correct that discrepancy or non-conformance if found. Now, the second scenario on this can be based upon the duration that we can assign to vendors to put their information into MDO. Post that duration, the action can actually be performed by the buyer. So it becomes uh, the pretty much the same setup that uh, uh, organizations typically have, where buyers collaborate with the vendors and fetch that information. Now, the advantage that vendors with any point of time have with if they manage their data themselves is at any point of time, most accurate information is updated into the system. And second is uh, if their contact person, if the key information gets updated, they don't have to contact anybody within the company to get that updated. They can update it themselves. Okay, so yeah, so we can set up we can address this challenge in both the ways, that we can have only the passive governance rules set up for MDO and cross verify it, or give access to buyers to put in vendor information. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait for any other questions if anybody has on the on the on the call. All right. Else we can then wrap it up. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining on this session, and we look forward to meeting you again in our next webinar for MDO. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend ahead. Bye bye.